I met Luivette purely by accident in Chicago last spring at the Associated Writing Programs Conference there. I'd gone to a poetry reading put on by Tia Chucha Press in hopes of persuading a guy I'd done some prison writing panels with in the late 90s, Luis Rodriguez, to review my second novel. Luivette read from her first book, and I was so blown away that I asked her to read here last year. Though her teaching schedule prevented a 2012 reading this year, we're in luck. Luivette Resto was born in Aguas Buenas. Close, right? You get benefit of the doubt. Puerto Rico, but proudly raised in the Bronx. Her first book of poetry, Unfinished Portrait, was published in 2008 by Tia Chucha, and later named a finalist. She was later named, it was later named a finalist for the 2009 Paterson Poetry Prize. She is also a contributing poetry editor for Kweli Journal, a CantoMundo fellow, and a hostess of the monthly poetry reading series called Palabra, located at Avenue 50 Studio in LA. Her next book, Ascension, will be available in April 2013, courtesy of Tia Chucha Press. Let's welcome Luivette Resto.
Thank you, Michael. Finally, I'm glad to be up here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Fernando, for the reading. I am hungry and I want to dance after that for some reason. So I totally appreciate it. And thank you, everybody here, for coming. I know it's pretty warm out here, which is actually really nice. And so thank you so much for your attention this afternoon. So, like Michael mentioned, I am not from Los Angeles or California originally. I was born in Puerto Rico and came here when I was 4 to the States, and then moved to the Bronx, and then from there, life took me different places. When you first meet anybody, I think that one of the first questions that people ask is what? Where are you from, right? After your name, it's like, oh, where are you from? And I always thought that that was an interesting question, because if you were to really answer that question holistically, I don't think people will be ready for the answer, because you are from many different places. And so this is my way of responding to people when they want to ask me where I'm from.
Where are you from?
Where are you from? Here you go. From the house my mother worked 2 jobs to pay for. From the hallway where I heard neighborhood chisme about Doña Carolina and her heroin-addicted son Danny getting out of jail for the 3rd time. From the bedroom where I cried realizing I am one of many. From history never taught in high school classrooms. From books omitted from required reading lists. From the church pew where I contemplated my morality as a number and legacy as a person. From San Gabriel River Parkway where TV news reports live. From Insomniac Cement Stoop where lottery tickets are confused with maps of freedom. From the Ivy League that reported me their most popular statistic with a picture of me, a white girl, and a black man on the cover of the catalog. From the land cultivated by the Indio, renamed by the European. From the city of New York, where expression is free and understanding an option. From the rooftop, where different tongues resonate a butterfly's whisper. From the window, I draw a heart on the condensation, watching it bleed on the pane. So when I first moved out here, which about like 10 years ago now, come August, I was homesick for a really long time, and I still get homesick. I go back to New York about 3 times a year, which is very expensive, but I need to go home. And even though I live in LA, I always tell people, well, I live in LA, but I'm from New York, and that's always going to be the case. And so I felt the need to write a poem honoring where I came from, because it made me who I am and who I still am today. So this poem is called City Limits. The sign read, "Welcome to Los Angeles," as I said goodbye to the coquita man pushing his cart on those humid July afternoons, when fire hydrants recreated geysers with the help of a hollow tin can, bodegas carrying cola champaña blasting bachata boleros, men named Papo throwing wooden dominoes on a table supported by 2 milk cartons, street corner viejos reminiscing about their islands, hoping to return because death and birth begin with her. Heat lamps keeping Dala Alcapurrias warm by sweaty Gucci-Fita windows. Admiring a graffiti memorial on storefront, paying homage to slain children, Pope John Paul II, and Big Pun. Feel the rhythm of a 6-train caboose sway me back and forth to sleep. Cheer the Bronx Bombers onto yet another victory series. Jeer a Mets fan for being a Mets fan. Buy a hot dog and a pretzel from the same stand. Hear yo, asshole, and puñeta all in one sentence. Visit the gorillas in the morning. Push my way for a small peek at the Rockefeller tree. Watch the wind encircle the fall leaves into a tornado frenzy. Silently recite the Our Father when I walk by ground zero. Touch snow for the first time all over again. One of the things that I recognized when I moved to LA for the first time that we don't really suffer too much from in New York because we have great public transportation is traffic. And I hate traffic with a passion. And I noticed that when I first moved out here, that it could take you 15 minutes to go a quarter of a mile. And one of the things I noticed for the first time when I was on the 605, again, I don't know how familiar you are, but on the 605, there's this long stretch. And I remember I was a passenger, my husband's obviously driving, and I look over and I see people. And I remember asking him, what's going on? Who are those people? And he's from California originally, from LA, and he just was like, oh, those are the strawberry pickers. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Now, in New York, we don't really have that, and I thought it was really fascinating that in LA that there's a collision of agriculture and infrastructure, that you can have two things coexisting. In New York, we really don't have that. We just have a highway, and that's it. So I was fascinated by that, the fact that here I am sitting in traffic, and then on the right-hand side, there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 dozen people picking strawberries. So that really stayed with me, and so this poem is called 605 Strawberries. Not 605 strawberries, like people think before. Sitting in infamous LA traffic on the 605 between Ramona and Valley Boulevard, my eyes drift to the hunched over people looking back at me through strawberry fields. A row of eñes minus the tildes. Never rising for a break, they pick the freshest strawberries, later dipped by Beverly Hills chocolatiers, sliced onto fruit platters, placed as a garnish next to the entree. Scenic views of 80-foot power lines and lottery billboards with the caption, "Your eyes don't deceive you," loom over the organic, while cars sit and stare like a patron waiting for his quota to be met. From the first rise of stockbrokers, actors, TV executives revving their 6-figure Lamborghinis, to the vertical stretch of muscle and bone, massaged by red-tinted fingers, amalgamated with the sweetness of fruit and the salt of commerce as sustenance and sustenance meet. I don't always write about things that happen to me personally. Sometimes people will share stories with me and I'll document them. I think that the role of a writer is to document the undocumented, essentially. And so this poem was inspired by my sister-in-law. This really did happen to her, so if you pay attention to the poem and listen to it, this did happen to her approximately, I would say, 13 years ago. And the title of this poem is called Adela's Purse. She marched into the upscale department store with the passion and smoothness of a corrido, as butterflies circled her body, cooling the fair skin inherited by an absent father. Holding onto her purse purposefully like a soldier and his rifle, curly hair pulled back into 2 long braids. She marched to customer service, demonstrating the obvious difference between her purse and the one they accused her of stealing. Apologies nor gift certificates were necessary, as Adela pointed out the irony of the word patron in patronizing. I'm a really huge advocate of tattoos. Does anybody have tattoos? Anybody? Yeah? A few? Just a few? Yeah? Maybe it's a silly question, but I'm a big advocate of them. I think that they can tell stories. I don't know how many people agree. They can tell someone's story if you just actually, observe their body. And so I write a lot about them, and this is one of them, and it's called Tattoos. Caridad loves tattoos. For her, the body is both machine and portable museum. Daily, she admires the portraits needled into her imperfect body. Swirls of red and ovals of black cross her flesh. The Taíno symbol for hurricane on her right shoulder blade, hypnotizing onlookers. The Taína fertility goddess Atabe, painted on her stomach, smiles down on her uterus. The first tattoo is her favorite, on her lower back left of her spine. There they stood, 2 flags of Mexico and Puerto Rico, waving in the stillest weather of her brown flesh. People ask Caridad what her flags mean. A man, cultural identity, stupidity. Many wonder, no one guesses right. Busy gossips never think of the child she hid from conversations. he would have been beautiful, have her eyes. With each passing year, her tattoos became badges of him. She carried him every day, talking, teaching him the purpose and place of accents, where the moon lives in the day, how the rustling of trees sound like waves on the shores of Puerto Rico. All the mothers laugh at her, calling her the colorful talking loca, as she continues to add more pictures to her body for her child's company. I was mentioning to Michael when I first got here, because unfortunately people mispronounce my name a lot, and I didn't really care for a really long time how it was pronounced. I truly had a love-hate relationship about my name, and I think I came to terms with it approximately maybe like 3 years ago. I hated my first name. It's Luivette, and no one could ever get it right. No one can say it right on the phone. It's like I'm a Louisa, I'm Lisa. One time I was Elaine. I have no idea how, but someone asked for Elaine. I was like, there's no Elaine here. But it took me a long time to come to terms with my name. And so this poem is called Latina Etymology. According to Puerto Rican folklore, my name would have been Luis Omar if I was born a boy. I was created out of spontaneity, not stupidity or love. Like my conception, my name was created via mindless thoughts crashing into one another. My grandmother, the neologist, stumbled upon my name, doodling on her desk pad the permutations of my parents' names. Growing up, I cursed when teachers could not pronounce it on first days, cringed when strangers asked if I was part French, watched Romper Room every morning hoping Miss Molly would say my name when she looked in the magic mirror. Idolized the Marias and Socorros of the world because accents and double R's never hovered over my head. Resentment grew like weeds as my name was confused for others. Louisa, Lisette, Lucretia. Nicknames were an option, but I didn't want to be called Vet or Corvette to satisfy lazy Anglified tongues. Masculine pseudo-names prevailed, stripping me of my curves and vulnerability every time I heard Lou or Louie. Sometimes I fantasized my name in lights, but my illusions quickly dimmed like the twilight, because accolades were only bestowed upon sonorous names like Megan, Vanessa, and Kate, while dissonant names became the poet laureates of the Goya Isle. Maturity eventually settled, and accents never provided shade like peking willows. Staring at my reflection, I find the common denominators in my name. One half an absent father who willingly never saw his only child grow up. One half an alcoholic mother who refused to see her only child grow up. I was created out of spontaneity, not stupidity or love. All right, I mentioned earlier, so when I came to this country, I didn't speak English. And I read about being bilingual a lot because there is something about that when you identify yourself. And when I first came here to the States, they let me into kindergarten because my grandmother is, to this day, a huge push for education. And when I came to the States, my mother didn't come with us. She came eventually. So my grandmother was the one that registered me for kindergarten. She paid for my tuition for the first year. And so she convinced, I have no idea how, she convinced this Catholic principal to let this 4.5-year-old girl attend school when she wasn't even, you have to be 5. That's one thing. I wasn't of age, and I couldn't speak the language. Somehow, my grandmother was able to do that, and I believe it. But I had a hard time, I remember, that first year because I couldn't communicate. So I would ask other girls next to me to translate for me. And so this is where this poem comes from. It's called Kindergarten Translations. 1982 brought a plethora of newness. Winter on my island skin, earmuffs drowning out Spanish conversations, doubting why we moved. Snowflakes on my tongue as I ran to catch the 42 bus. Sirens instead of coquilles at night. The classroom covered in UPS brown, bulletin boards decorated in primary colors. The smell of tacky glue and finger paint lingered in the air as my size 8 shoes stepped on the checkered floor. Mrs. Farrell made me her impromptu show and tell, introducing me to 28 confused faces, wooden easels, and the alphabet wrapping the room like a birthday present. The ch sadly absent from the wall. The back of the class became my new hideaway, right behind Vanessa Vives, who unknowingly became my best friend as she translated Mrs. Farrell's lesson about the seasons. A colorful chalk-drawn tree on the blackboard stared back at me, the orange and red leaves resembling the rows of mango trees I left behind. Mrs. Farrell asked the class, "What happens to the leaves in autumn?" "The trees wiggle them off and they fall on its roots," Vanessa answered for me. And I'm going to finish with this one. Like I mentioned a few seconds ago, my grandmother plays a huge role in my life. I don't know how your grandparents are in your world. But my grandmother to this day I consider her one of my bestest friends. And too many people don't know this, but she never had her own children. Technically, she's not my grandmother. She's one of those relatives, that you say you say, "Oh, that's my cousin," but they're really not your cousin. Or something like that. "Oh, that's my sister," but they're not really your sister. But you grew up with them, so they feel like family. And technically, my grandmother's not my grandmother. She's actually my great aunt. She raised my mom and my aunt when her older brother couldn't. She took over when they were just 2 and 1 years old. So it's, for all intents and purposes, my mother and my aunt see my grandmother as mom, because that is the only mother that they've ever known. She never had children of her own. She had an opportunity to get engaged and marry, and she turned it down because the man that she wanted to marry told her, "Well, if you want to come with me, you can bring them with you." And she said, "Well, I won't marry you then." And so she never had her own children to this day. So this one is called Hail Maria. For Maria Virginia Garcia Lozada. Hail Maria, because when your baby brother knocked on your door, you promoted yourself from aunt to mother without hesitation. And when cancer took your sister's left breast, you set the table for 3 more children. Hail Maria, because when a ring was put on your finger, you declined. You already had responsibilities in the name of Carmen, Diana, Norma, Jose, y Melba. And when an unexpected grandchild was placed on your lap, you made sure she was loved. Hail Maria, because when your mother lost her independence, you washed her body every night. And even though your womb never felt the pain of birth, your heart felt the anguish of a parent. Hail Maria, because when you were born, you lived up to the prophecy of your name. Thank you.